Good morning, everybody. This is a live emergency briefing with High Plains Insanity expected to begin, or resume, I should say, next week. It looks like Monday through Thursday look like pretty significant severe weather days, starting off near the Bismarck area tomorrow, and it looks like a late initiator tomorrow, probably at about 5 or 6 p.m., maybe just off the northeastern side of the Black Hills, and those storms will move off into far northern South Dakota, into far southern North Dakota, and through evening it looks like there could be a conglomeration or a cluster of supercells that moves through south central North Dakota, maybe impacting portions of the I-95 corridor, and it does look like there is a west to east boundary that's also going to be in place there. From central North Dakota off to the east, draped along that I-94 corridor. And that's only going to intensify the low-level shear and instability co-location there, especially near Bismarck, Bismarck to the Jamestown area, along that west to east oriented boundary. But one thing I'm noticing in the models is it does appear to be a trend off to the west and to the southwest just a little bit. Looks like we could easily be in play working supercells that develop just off the northeast side of the Black Hills, and those could head northeast into the target area, eventually interacting with that west-east oriented boundary very close to the Bismarck area up near I-94. So that's the area I'm targeting tomorrow, and I'm going to have to leave here pretty soon. I'm picking up the subsonic sensor on the way up there. You may remember that I left it on the side of the road to the south of Benkelman, Nebraska there, so I'm meeting up with Monica Mercer, who has kept that device safe, the beacon of science, and I look forward to picking that up and then resuming our science out there, trying to collect infrasound data of tornadic supercells and those hail cores. And as I head off to North Dakota, it looks like then the threat on Tuesday could be quite substantial across northeastern Montana. And there's going to be a shortwave jet streak punching up north through Wyoming. I do expect meridional storm motions on Tuesday too, so largely south to north oriented storm motions there. Low levels, though, are going to be incredibly backed out of the east-southeast, especially in the northeastern corner of Montana, the northwestern corner of North Dakota, and into far southeastern Saskatchewan, too. So I know that Sean Schofer and the Dominator 3 are going to be watching this event closely, and they're considering dropping south into southeastern Saskatchewan as well on Tuesday, as it looks like there could be a pretty substantial severe weather day, including the threat of gorilla hail, isolated tornadoes up there in the northeastern corner of Montana into southeastern Saskatchewan, so I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on that. Then it looks like that main wave begins to eject on Wednesday, so there into central Montana. Looks quite interesting. Storms firing off the higher terrain there up toward Great Falls as well, southeast of Billings, and those storms are going to be moving north off of that northwest to southeast oriented boundary. And then the threat expands on Thursday. Massive target area here across eastern Montana, eastern Wyoming, western Dakotas, the Nebraska Panhandle, and into northeastern Colorado. Looks like a pretty substantial severe weather day with all hazards possible, including gorilla hail, isolated tornadoes. And I wouldn't be surprised if this extends into southern Saskatchewan as well here, as the Canada season is definitely beginning early. Yesterday there was a tornado to the southeast of Calgary, and Mark was out there chasing, but his dedication to science was definitely on display yesterday as he was testing out the lightning sensor there on some lightning storms to the southwest of Calgary, and ended up missing that tornado producer. It looks like that tornado might have been on the ground for over 40 minutes too, starting off as a dust swirl that many people identified as a land spout, but clearly it coupled to the mesocyclone located in the vicinity of that clear slot punching into the mesocyclone. So to me it looked like a mesocyclonic tornado, pretty obviously there just to the southeast of Calgary, and that tornado was on the ground for 40 minutes up there just to the southeast of Calgary. And so that shows you kind of a peek into the future here of the Canada season. It does look like the Canada severe weather season is going to be quite active as we move through the month of June and especially into July. I think that basically is just a peek into the future with the Canadian prairie season likely to be quite active. But this week's going to be active as well. At least 4 days in a row of storm chasing, starting off in central North Dakota up there along that boundary. Tuesday, then the threat shifts into northeastern Montana, southeastern Saskatchewan, northwestern corner of North Dakota. Wednesday, that threat looks like central, maybe even western Montana there, firing off the higher terrain from that northeast to southeast oriented boundary, basically from Great Falls down to Billings. Those storms will be moving largely northward through the green target area there. Then on Thursday, that target area expands dramatically, as we mentioned. And right now, the biggest days look to be Tuesday and Thursday here in the high plains. But one thing about the northern plains and the high plains is it only takes one storm really to go crazy. You remember the Bowdle, South Dakota day, May 22nd, 2010. One storm basically out there in northeastern South Dakota going completely nuts. The Manchester day in 2003, one storm that went nuts, even though there was a tornado producer just to the south of the Manchester storm as well. So now let's break down the detailed models here. And I'm starting off with kind of a generic dew point map that's probably going to be inaccurate. We'll go over to our friend, the 3-kilometer NAM here for high plains. 12Z models are out. Thank you guys for those stars. That keeps live storm chasing happening, keeps these live briefings pumping as well. Thank you, Facebook supporters. Additionally, I'm going to get back to Storm Chase EDU content once this Northern Plains season begins to wind down, but I'm going to continue doing these live briefings, of course. And I'm thinking about doing something where you guys are able to submit a photo that shows storm structure, whether it be a tornadic supercell, non-tornadic, really anything, thunderstorm or severe weather related, even sub-severe, and I'll break down that photo and provide you my perspective on the storm structure. And we'll just keep doing that, photo after photo, briefing after briefing, going through every single photo that's submitted, and then we can break down that structure and also break down its tornado potential. But first, we got to see about 50 tornadoes here over the next week if we play our cards right. Here is the forecast for tomorrow. So this is Monday evening. We could start off with a quick synopsis here of the upper levels. We'll go into the mid-levels of the atmosphere. You can see this consolidated jet. You can see this little lobe of a vortex down into Southern California. That's going to eject the day after. On Tuesday afternoon, that ejects into eastern Wyoming, and it's possible that on the north side of that feature, that's where significant severe weather is going to be possible on Tuesday across eastern Montana from that little lobe or that vortex down there near California, likely bringing in some rain there into Southern California. That is going to eject as we get a large-scale trough starting to build over the western U.S., but this is the belt, a consolidated jet stream over the summertime ridge here, anchored over the central U.S., and it looks like that strongest mid-level flow is just on the North Dakota side of the border. And you've got about 30 to 40 knots there at 500 within that belt, and that goes over top that west to east oriented stationary front. You could call it a warm front, but basically it's a stationary front that's going to be draped over the I-94 corridor from central southwestern North Dakota along the I-94 corridor east of Bismarck, and those storms could initiate as well off the northeastern corner of the Black Hills and then drift up north toward that greater mid-level flow. And then we can look at the low-level jet here, and you can see that about a 25 to 30 knot low-level jet begins to develop. And one thing I noticed between last night's model runs and this morning is it does look like this system is trending just a little bit slower, and it does look like there's going to be a boundary that intersects into the northeastern side of the Black Hills. So it is very possible that supercells could initiate off the northeastern side of the Black Hills and then drift up toward that stronger mid and upper level flow that's going to be located over southern North Dakota and near that I-94 corridor. One thing I am noticing though is that the 3-kilometer NAM has a slightly weaker low-level jet than does the HRRR, and I don't like the HRRR model, especially when you're looking at just composite reflectivity, but I can use it for some environments out here as well. And the HRRR has a stronger low-level jet, and that trend is continuing. It's also evident in the HRRR with this westward slower trend to this severe weather, probably developing near the Bismarck area, maybe a little bit further southwest of that, maybe even off the northeastern corner of those Black Hills. But definitely the HRRR shows pretty strong 1-kilometer winds there. Strong low-level jet in excess of 30 knots, nosing into that west to east oriented boundary there. And that low-level jet does increase with time, so about the 8 to 9 p.m. hour, once those supercells evolve into south-central North Dakota, maybe even near the South Dakota-North Dakota border, a strengthening low-level jet is going to be pumping into the south side of that cluster, and that could definitely even lead to a substantial tornado threat there near sunset in central North Dakota, depending on how quickly those storms are able to congeal into a complex of supercell storms. And there you can see on the 3-kilometer NAM that increase in the low-level jet just between 0Z and 1Z. So that's 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time toward 8 p.m. Look at that, between 7 and 8 p.m. That increase in the low-level jet there being depicted by the 3-kilometer NAM. And zoom in a little bit closer here as well. And I did get some good storms last night, some incredible lightning off the Colorado foothills. I did get the bird in the air yesterday across Colorado, and showing some incredible cloud formations, a very turbulent layer in the mid-level cloud deck up there. A lot of outflow boundaries cruising around in eastern Colorado. But I was able to get some pretty decent lightning shots last night captured from the bird, so I'm excited to post that right after this live. And then I'm going to hit the road. It's about a 12-hour drive up to the target area. I'm going to pick up the subsonic sensor on the way, and then Gizmo and I are heading up to target this mass. And this is likely going to be a cluster of supercells by this time, or an MCS into south central North Dakota. Possibly, though, some of those supercell structures on the south side of that cluster where that low-level jet is feeding into, some of these down on the south end of the cluster, north central South Dakota near the border, could certainly have tornado potential going even after sunset, as this big-time complex of storms continues to push east, turning into a massive windbag here by about 10 p.m. Central Time. Still a possibility of some supercell storms, though, along the southern edge of that line. And then eventually this turns into a complex of storms that slides into eastern North Dakota as we go about 11 p.m. to midnight. But the trend I expect will continue. I think it's even going to push a little bit further west, and we could have these supercell storms developing near the Bismarck area, maybe south of Bismarck, and then lifting east-northeast as those deeper updrafts get embedded within that stronger mid and upper level flow. Then we'll see a rapid acceleration of at least the northern edge of that complex of storms as the southern edge lags behind just a bit. Let's take a look at some of our traditional parameters here too. We'll look at surface-based CAPE. Nice slug of CAPE just feeding that complex of storms overnight tonight, or overnight tomorrow night. A lot of CAPE out here, 4,000 to 5,000 CAPE along this west to east oriented boundary. And usually you want to target the western gradient of these massive CAPE blobs, kind of the western or the northwestern gradient. That's usually where those storms develop and go tornadic. If you end up targeting kind of the eastern edge of that big time instability, you'll be waiting there until about midnight for the arrival of that complex of storms. Here you can see the hint of an outflow boundary too, extending off to the southwest toward the northeastern side of the Black Hills. So I wouldn't be surprised if storms develop off the northeastern edge of the Black Hills. They're able to interact with that outflow boundary, and then eventually when they get a little bit closer to Bismarck, that's when they're going to be embedded within that stronger mid-level flow of about 30 knots here, 30 to 40 knots at 500. And you can see a little subtle perturbation here in the mid-level flow, a little bit of an acceleration of that mid-level flow here. That could help to initiate storms further north along that west-east oriented stationary front, maybe pretty close to the Bismarck area there as well. But then you go down into South Dakota and you have dramatically weaker 500 millibar flow as you get a little bit closer to the northeastern edge of the Black Hills. So really what I would like to see is for one of these subtle mid-level disturbances here to provide just a little bit of lift and then to initiate those storms along the western edge of that boundary. Looking at the 0 to 1 kilometer shear, relatively negligible at 6 p.m. Then we go a little bit forward to 36 hours at 0Z. Start to get just a little bit of 0 to 1 kilometer shear there near the Bismarck area, but really you need that acceleration of the low-level jet to really to get that non-zero 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. There you can start to see it materialize there at about 2Z, about 9 p.m. You start to get some of that 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity approaching 200 there near that boundary. And as those supercell storms are evolving across south central North Dakota there, you finally start to get wind shear supportive of tornado producing storms at about 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time. But you have plenty of daylight up here in the North Country in North Dakota, that's for sure. And we can look at a forecast 3 kilometer NAM sounding here. Look at that big looping hodograph. This is just a textbook Northern Plains, High Plains insanity, stationary front / warm front type of a hodograph, hybrid of the Great Plains and the High Plains. You get those easterlies in the lowest kilometer, flipping around to a strong southerly low-level jet, accelerating to 30 to 40 knots, and then gradually flipping around to that modest but still sufficient westerly mid-level flow at about 30 to 40 knots. So you have a lot of directional shear, a lot of speed shear within that profile, and that results in a largely looping hodograph, as you can see. Definitely very supportive of tornadoes. So if you do have supercell storms that are continuing near sunset and just a little bit after sunset, then those are going to have the potential of producing tornadoes, and even a strong tornado threat with some of those supercell storms if they're able to evolve across into central North Dakota and interact with that stationary front and get it embedded within some of that stronger mid-level flow there. Then we look at the HRRR 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. Looks a little bit messy out there. Gravity waves going all over the place, but you could definitely see an enhancement of that 0 to 1 kilometer shear. A little bit of an acceleration of the low-level jet feeding into that supercell storm there that is depicted just to the east of the Bismarck area by 0Z, 7 p.m. So that storm does have some strong tornado potential there, even though initially when it develops at about 5 or 6 p.m., the 0 to 1 kilometer shear is quite modest. The acceleration of that low-level jet as you get closer to sunset, and especially just after sunset, ramps up that low-level shear available to this storm. And this thing could easily be a tornado producer, maybe even a strong tornado or two out there across south-central North Dakota, southeastern North Dakota late. But it is trending a little bit further west, so Bismarck is definitely in play for that severe weather tomorrow. And the strongest deep layer shear, though, definitely evolves across North Dakota, just on the North Dakota side of that line. And then a little bit closer to the Black Hills, you get more kind of air mass storms, weaker storms that aren't able to sustain after sunset, like this massive complex up into south-central North Dakota, southeastern North Dakota, and very likely the southern edge of this complex of supercells is going to have some surface-based storms that are undoubtedly going to be tornadic. And eventually that complex of storms arrives in the Fargo to Grand Forks area, late night, probably 10 or 11 p.m. at night, maybe even later than that. And you still get these supercell storms kind of evolving along that boundary as that west to east oriented stationary front sags just a little bit south. So we're going to need to keep an eye on these across south central North Dakota, southeastern North Dakota on the nose of this low level jet. We don't like the HRRR, but we'll still consult with it here and there. Got to keep tabs on the enemy model. But really, the 3 kilometer NAM and the RAP are my go-to models for the Northern Plains here. And we'll see what the RAP is showing for Monday as well. And then Tuesday. This is Tuesday up here across northeastern Montana on the 3 kilometer NAM. Let's zoom out just a little bit. And usually get complexes of storms, long-lived MCSs out here across the Northern Plains. So really, you always want to stick within the short range. That's where you're most confident with these severe weather setups. And even though I have northeastern Montana into southeastern Saskatchewan highlighted here, a lot of that is because I expect meridional storm motion. So I do expect those storms to develop down into east central Montana. But as we go through Tuesday evening, I expect those meridional storm motions to carry those supercell storms into northeastern Montana, northwestern corner of North Dakota, and southeastern Saskatchewan up there. I know Sean's going to be excited for this event. And look at that southeasterly low-level jet ripping into southeastern Saskatchewan there, increasing over 40 to 50 knots. You have another pipe, though, here of a low-level jet moving into western North Dakota, into east central Montana. So I do think you're going to get a couple areas here of tornado potential on Tuesday. One that will slide from northeastern Montana into southeastern Saskatchewan, and then another one that'll develop off the mountains near Billings, lift off to the northeast, and then east central Montana could be very active into western North Dakota there, especially just after 0Z as well. So I think there's going to be 2 different modes on Tuesday, and a pretty significant severe weather day I expect on Tuesday. And look at that, the 3 kilometer NAM reflectivity is hinting at that as well, showing a complex of supercell storms across southeastern Saskatchewan, another complex across east central Montana, with a southeasterly low-level jet pipe feeding into both of those clusters. So I do expect each of these clusters to have tornado potential, gorilla hail potential as well, southeastern Saskatchewan, east central Montana on Tuesday. And a lot of that is driven by that jet streak basically that bulb of a vortex down into Southern California surges into Wyoming by this time. And I think that this piece of energy, we'll call it, this jet streak, this vortex, is going to help to provide sufficient lift in concert with orographic lift here near Billings to fire those storms a little bit closer to 21 to 22Z. That's when they'll develop the arrival of this southern vortex here, and that will initiate storms off the mountains near Billings. They'll pass into east central Montana. This northern pipe also, this is going to be a little bit of a jet streak here that's going to help to initiate those storms across northeastern Montana, and those are going to pass into southeastern Saskatchewan. And then the low-level jet begins to increase as we get closer to 0Z, showing those two shear zones. More back to low-level winds here across southeastern Saskatchewan, supporting sufficient wind shear for tornadoes despite those meridional storm motions. But then you also get an acceleration of the low-level jet squeezed along the north side of the Black Hills there. And this is the key to working these high plains. You want to look for these 0 to 3 kilometer shear pipes of moisture, instability, and shear feeding into these clusters of storms, whether they're in southeastern Saskatchewan or whether they're in east central Montana. Looks like Tuesday is going to be a very big day for severe weather. And then Wednesday focuses a little bit further west, central western Montana. But here you can see this big instability, a bit of a dry line evolving, kind of an arc-shaped dry line evolving here across far southeastern Montana. But meridional storm motions are going to cause these storms to move into this instability across northeastern Montana, east central Montana as well. You get moisture funneling northward over the north side of the Black Hills. You get another pipe here right in the north side with some pooling of that moisture along the synoptic scale warm front. So it looks like a very dangerous day across the high plains. Look at that. Glasgow, northeastern Montana up there, northwestern North Dakota. A pipe of 3,000 plus Cape streaming into northeastern Montana. Supercell storms. The models are showing some mixing of that dew point right now across northeastern Wyoming into western South Dakota and southeastern Montana. Not as much mixing though across the Nebraska Panhandle into southeastern Wyoming, so you'll probably have a bit of an increased chance of severe weather down here as well, southeastern Wyoming into the Nebraska Panhandle. Greater instability down there, not quite as good of wind shear down in that location. You can look at energy helicity index, that composite index definitely shows these two target areas quite well. This shows 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative helicity overlaid with surface-based Cape. So you can definitely see an interesting southern mode on Tuesday afternoon as well. Sterling area into the southern Nebraska Panhandle. You can look at some of those forecast soundings on Tuesday as well down in the southern mode. Smaller hodographs, bigger Cape, sufficient deep layer shear, bulk shear greater than 30 knots. This looks like a gorilla hail high plains type of a day here further south. Southeastern Wyoming into the Nebraska Panhandle. Very thick Cape there as well. Decent directional shear. But you can see when you pick a hodograph across northwestern North Dakota, much bigger, more favorable hodograph for tornadoes on Tuesday across northwestern North Dakota, eastern Montana there. Very steep lapse rates, steep 0 to 3 kilometer Cape, thick Cape as well in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. Stronger magnitudes, wind magnitudes from the low levels all the way through the upper levels of the atmosphere. Sufficient directional shear as well happening. So that's why this day on Tuesday looks like a pretty substantial severe weather day. And of course I'm going to be chasing this event. But that's looks like a very dangerous setup coming up here across the northern high plains. Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday again in central Montana. Thursday, an even bigger setup, ejecting once again across eastern Wyoming, eastern Montana, western Dakotas. And we are going to be chasing it all. Mitochondria have been recharged a little bit, probably about halfway recharged now. This is on a Wednesday, middle of the week, kind of showing that further west target area, maybe even central Montana, possibly out toward Great Falls on Wednesday. Decent hodographs out there across central Montana. Decent moisture as well, big moisture across the northern plains. I think we're setting out to see a very active northern plains season where tornado potential just continues through the summer, probably through July. Banking up right up against hurricane season. And so I feel like severe weather season is just getting started out here. Whoa. Just heard a discharge of a weapon outside. Sounded kind of far away. Maybe some type of a BB gun or something out there. So here's this big time trough that's going to be dominating the western U.S. This is on Wednesday. And watch on Thursday what happens here with the ejection of this lead wave. Could bring in Canada into play. Looks like Alberta, Mark up there, chase and spin. You could have another setup. Maybe some northerly movers out there across southern Alberta on Thursday into Saskatchewan. Main wave, though, punches into Wyoming, central and eastern Montana, and the Dakotas here. Deadwood looks like a good place to stay after Thursday. So a big-time trough, and look at that. Big flow back behind it as well. And that's going to help maintain this trough. You do have a little bit of a ridge kind of squeezing out southwest and northeast there. A positively tilted anticyclone really getting squeezed. Not much of a big-time anticyclone over the Gulf or Caribbean zones out there. But look at this flow. Just basically a belt of southwesterly flow and mean troughing trying to dominate the western U.S. And a lot of that stronger flow is focused over the northern plains. Here, as we go toward the middle of June, we get another big-time trough building in. And look at how the nose of these jets keep punching into the Canadian prairies there, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Looks like it's going to be a very active tornado season up there for the Canadians. Hopefully I'll be able to get across the border here, maybe by late June. It looks like after June 21st it could open up. June 15 still very strong mid and upper level flow here across the high plains and the northern Great Plains and up into Canada. So the active severe weather season looks to continue through mid-June. So a very active month ahead here for June, folks, with this active jet stream and a tendency for troughing across the western U.S. Full bore. But this week, for the next 4 days, here are the target areas, color-coded. Monday in pink, Tuesday in red, Wednesday green, Thursday blue. Tuesday and Thursday look like big days, but so does Monday and Wednesday. Really, all of these days, all modes of severe weather are possible. Guerrilla hail, isolated tornado threat, you name it, it's possible. So thank you, everybody, for joining me for this live weather briefing. Thank you, Facebook supporters, for making live storm chasing possible and these live briefings. I'm going to be back into full-blown chase mode starting here in about an hour, heading off to the northeast. Last week was for mitochondria regeneration, so I think that they're good to go, about halfway recharged. And I'm excited to get back out here and do science, pick up the subsonic sensor on the way up to the northern plains. And I'm going to continue these live weather briefings. It's important to chase like a champion next week, not necessarily today. Today's going to be a travel day from the Golden, Colorado area up to the northern high plains, and then we'll return to our home away from home, Deadwood, South Dakota, just in time for northern high plains insanity. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this weather report. Thank you for everything. Never stop chasing.